and see you there. Book. A little different format today. Not walking in, taking the shoes off, not putting off the taking off the sport coat, putting on the jersey. It's raining outside. It's raining quite heavy, actually. So we won't play around with that. Instead, that's good. It's pretty strong, but America likes strong coffee. Like it. Do it a little more normal way. Today, big day. It's kind of confrontation number one. So a couple of questions like I've seen over and over again. I just haven't pulled all the boxes yet. One is kind of what's the official start date of the Cold War. If you want to give an official start date, June 29th, 1948 is a pretty good one. Here's why. Prior to 1948, the issues between the United States and the Soviet Union had been more verbal struggles and stuff, where we were distrusting them, they were distrusting us, but it's all like verbal. 1948 is the first actual action, the first actual confrontation between the two. See? So I wrote all these notes down to keep me on track for 10 minutes. That part, donezo. This also sets kind of the course of the rest of the Cold War, how relation between the U.S. and the Soviet Union are going to play out. But before that, though, your essential question is this. What is the long-term impact of the Berlin blockade? Okay, so here's what ends up happening. Prior to the Berlin blockade, and we talked about this in another video, but just to remind you guys, Germany was broken up into 4 different quadrants. You had a quadrant controlled essentially by the Allies, so that's broken up into the United States zone, a French zone, and a British zone, and then you had the area broken up into the Soviet zone. Berlin was the same way. The deal was that unofficially they would keep this road open so the Allies could resupply Western Berlin. Officially, there were 3 air corridors. So there were 3 kind of areas of airspace where the Allies could bring airplanes in and out. There's about 2 million people inside of Berlin at the time. So what ends up happening is Stalin decides to blockade the road. And his idea is, I'm going to starve out the citizens of Berlin, forcing the Allies basically to give Berlin to me, and that would open up the rest of Germany. And President Truman, let's get a picture up of him. Okay. He's confused by all this. And here's why almost every American president, except for one, we're not there yet, we're not there for a while, can't understand the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union believes it's a zero-sum game. A zero-sum game in political terms means either I win and you lose, or you win and I lose. That there's no negotiation between the two. The Soviets believe the entire Cold War and this conflict with the United States is a zero-sum game. They have to win, otherwise they're entirely going to lose. American presidents, with one exception, believed it wasn't a zero-sum game, that we could peacefully coexist with each other. So when Stalin blockades Berlin, that doesn't make any sense to U.S. policymakers, especially Truman, because why can't we just coexist with each other? That this isn't a zero-sum game. You guys can have your sphere of influence, we can have our sphere of influence, and everything's going to work out fine. But that's not how the Soviet mindset was. And remember back to George Kennan, that little guy from Milwaukee, in a long telegram where, crazy enough, he actually predicts the entire Cold War and how it's going to play out. His idea is this, that the Soviets, what they're going to do is whenever they sense weakness, they're going to push as far as they possibly can until someone stops them. And I took this quote directly because I want to make sure I get it right. His big thing was this, that there are 2 strategic ways to beat the Soviets. One, you need to use large military force. But 2, you need to have the moral courage and the self-confidence to fight the Soviets with ideas. And Kennan writes this in 1948. Unfortunately, though, not a lot of U.S. presidents actually listen to Kennan. One of the other things that Kennan kind of lays out, too, is that the major goal of the communists is to undermine Western countries and form disunity inside Western countries, pit people against each other, young versus old, rich versus poor, and that their goal is to fan those flames. Now, in another video, we're actually going to talk about how they're fairly effective at doing that, maybe not so much in the United States, but in other countries. So this sets the stage for the Berlin blockade, where what Stalin does is he cuts off all travel, also resupplying to Berlin, with the goal of starving out Berlin, forcing the citizens of West Berlin and the Allies to basically give up Berlin to the Soviets, and then that would then allow the Soviet Union to come in, take the rest of Germany. Stalin knows that. He's banking on a weak response from the United States, and this is battle one in the Cold War. United States, we have some options here. No one wants to go to war over Berlin, and Stalin's banking on the United States is not going to be willing to trade Boston for Berlin. The United States at the time still has the atomic bomb, while the Soviets don't, so that's kind of an X factor in here, but Stalin doesn't believe the U.S. will actually use it. So, according to Western thinkers, what Stalin's doing is completely irrational. What Stalin's doing, though, in his mind, is it's a strategic decision. So, coffee. Truman realizes the West has to stand up to Stalin here at Berlin, because if he doesn't, the rest of Europe is going to fall to Stalin, recognizing the United States is weak. Here's kind of the logistical numbers of this. So we can't resupply them by the road. We can't give up Berlin. What if we use those 3 air corridors, those 3 pieces of airspace? And so the plan is that we'll resupply the city of Berlin using air power. Here's the problem, though. There's about 2 million people you need to feed per day in Berlin. This is logistically, this is a nightmare. It would take per day 640 tons of wheat, 110 tons of meat or fish, 11 tons of coffee, 144 tons of veggies, 3,400 tons of fuel. That's just per day to keep Berlin open. It would take about 5 tons of shipments, like tons worth of poundage of food and fuel per day to keep it open. And so Stalin doesn't shoot down any of the planes when they're coming in because he believes this isn't going to be a success. And he's kind of right at the beginning, where in the to keep it open, you need 5,000 per day. In the first week, they're only at 90 tons per day. And it looks like this is going to be an abysmal failure. However, though, another takeaway from this in terms of the large picture of the Cold War is United States utilizing technology to overcome adversity. By week 2, it's up to 180 tons. Still, not nearly enough to keep Berlin actually running and actually open. But by the middle of summer, by August, things have changed. They're up to now 1 transport is landing every 30 seconds. There's 1,500 flights per day. And they get to be around the 5,000 mark. Like, this is just a matter of months. By February, they're up to 6,000 tons per day. By April of the following year, they're up to over 9,000 tons of supplies, food, and fuel being given to the people of Berlin per day. For Stalin, this is an absolute embarrassment. What he believed the United States would do is nothing actual physically. They would just write a letter. Just write a letter like FDR had done, because that was the FDR MO, that will just have a harshly worded letter, and that'll be all that'll happen to Stalin. Stalin miscalculated this, that the Western powers were more willing to fight than he thought they were. Where are we here? Oh, there we are. Okay. On May 12, 1949, Stalin lifts the blockade, allowing supplies to get in via the road again, realizing he's lost. This is a major victory for the United States during the Cold War. It does a couple things. One, it shows other European countries the United States will stand up to Stalin. They will stand up to the Soviet force. 2, it shows Stalin the United States is actually willing to fight. And I might not be able to push as far as I wanted to. 2, it shows the technological superiority of the United States and what we can do as a nation when our backs are against the wall. This is almost a no-win situation for us at the beginning, but through the ingenuity and technological know-how of the U.S. Air Force, we end up dropping nearly 10,000 tons of food in Berlin per day, something that was thought to be impossible. So that's another big takeaway. And so right now, early 1949, we're looking like we're winning the Cold War. We've won the first major battle, which is the Berlin blockade. We've made the Soviets and Stalin look bad. They have to go back kind of like with their tail between their legs. After 3 years of backpedaling, Western powers, here's awesome, Western powers have finally stood up to Stalin. However, in the next video, the Soviets do get one over on us. And the next video will be the Cold War getting hot. We have Korea, and we have one thing that completely changes the course of the next 40 years of the Cold War. and that's espionage, and that's the Soviets detonating their own nuclear weapon, which completely changed the power struggle inside of the conflict. So, as of early 1949, United States, hey, we're 1-0. Berlin blockade, we beat it with the Berlin airlift. We look good. We sent a powerful message to Stalin, but this thing is far, far from over. Okay, let's do some questions here. I don't know if it's a serious question box, joking question box. I have like a minute left. Let's see what we got here. I think it's a serious question. What did U.S. citizens do differently during the Cold War? Maggie B. The big thing was your day-to-day life wasn't much different, but you always had to be aware of the possibility of nuclear war. Once the Russians get their nuclear weapon in 1949, which we'll talk about next video, that Americans had to be aware of if a nuclear bomb were to go off in the United States, kind of what would happen and things like that. But day-to-day life stuff, lived under certain fears, but certainly not, I'm going to do a funny question, certainly not like a day-to-day, like, oh my gosh, doom and gloom. You just learn to deal with it. Funny question, give me a good one. Is it too early to open stores because of COVID-19? Hayden A. Hayden, good question. I'm going to do one more after this. Honestly, very good question. I don't know. People in the medical field say yes, it is. People in the business world say no, it's not. I don't know enough about the science behind it. I do know economics the final question is phenomenal. The economic component of it is something you have to consider. Like people losing their businesses, 67 million Americans possibly out of work. That's a huge, huge issue that's going to have huge ramifications like across the board. You need to consider both sides of this. With this, I would say possibly May 1st is a little too early, but I don't know enough about the science behind it to really give an indication. Okay, I know it's run over, but this is a great question. Emma W. Is Ellie DeMette the worst student I've ever had? That was a mean question. No, Ellie's a great student. I really like Ellie. Ellie's funny. I would never admit that she's funny. Don't show this video to Ellie. She's actually kind of funny. Emma, worst student I ever had? That guy. You know who I'm talking about. The guy. All right. Good final question. My eyes are terrifying sometimes. Let's see what we got here. Fill out the sheets. Submit them. We're going to talk about some spying next time because spying kind of kills us a little bit in the Cold War. Russia's really good at it. We're not as good. I'm going to keep doing the crazy eye thing for a while. Let's see here. So have a good rest of your day. Drink your coffee. Wash your hands. Do some push-ups. Do some pull-ups. Do a little bit of cardio. Believe in yourself. Believe in this country.